Hey, this is the national treasure, Nick Aldis, and you're listening to the All Night Long Wrestling Podcast.
Oh, didn't see you there. Just kidding. Welcome back to another edition of the All Night Long Wrestling Podcast. We are your host. He's the Stallion. I am the Enforcer. And you are checking out yet another week with your favorite underperforming, underwhelming, overachieving podcast duo. Some would say the best of the worst. And I think that's a fair assessment. Don't you, Joe?
High praise. High praise.
Listen, it's not often when we podcast. Today it's Thursday, June 11th. It's about 8 o'clock. Things are popping off. I wonder if this is more breaking news.
People commenting in our group chat about the breaking news. That's really what it comes down to.
So the good news is we do have some breaking news to discuss. It seems like, we have a fun show. We do have a fun show later because if you're a fan of buddy cop movies, and if you're not a fan of buddy cop movies, just get the fuck off of this podcast. This show, we're doing our 5 count. Joe.
Sorry about that. I'm sorry.
Dude, you fucking love buddy cop movies. What are you talking about?
I was just doing a bit. It's cool.
You were ribbing me. It was a harmful one. It was a harmful rib. So later on in the show, we're doing a 5 count because 3 ain't enough, man. I need 5. 5 count. Our top 5 buddy cop movies. And to bring it back to the wrestling theme, what wrestlers could play the roles in those movies? I had a lot of fun doing that. I'm a big movie guy, and another thing that you and I both love happens just coincidentally, buddy cop movies were huge in the 80s. And we fucking love the 80s, dude. So it really it worked out well. So we're going to touch on that later. But the breaking news last hour or so, Paul Heyman has been removed from the Monday Night Raw creative team. Now, everything I read stated that he's still going to be an on-air talent, I guess, he's going to be the advocate for Brock Lesnar, but he is going to be removed from creative. Creative will now be overseen by Bruce Pritchard, aka Brother Love, and they are going to unite the SmackDown and the Raw writing teams to have one writing team for both shows. So here's the thing. I listen to Busted Open Radio a lot, and 2 guys on that show, Tommy Dreamer and Bully Ray. Joe hates that I'm putting over another show, but hear me out. I'm going somewhere with this. Tommy Dreamer and Bully Ray, they have very close knowledge of the inner workings of the Paul Heyman mind. They know how Paul Heyman books angles and stuff like that. And they both say, without saying it, when an angle is happening on Raw, that it's a Paul Heyman idea. Now, Paul Heyman wasn't the end-all be-all of creative, but there were a lot of ideas that he came up with. And a lot of what they had talked about was stuff that was some of the only stuff on Monday Night Raw that I actually liked. So there's I'm really struggling to see why, Joe, they would do this, aside from maybe the ratings being down. But I mean, we're still in the middle of the pandemic here, and now whatever else is going on in the world. Do you think it's strictly attributed to the ratings?
I'm sure it's not strictly attributed to the ratings. I'm guessing that's a big part of it, or definitely a part of it, right? The ratings have gone down to all-time lows for Monday Night Raw, and a few months ago, a lot of that was attributed to the pandemic and people watching the news, the empty arena, no fan shows for pro wrestling being less entertaining. So I'm sure that's definitely playing a role in Heyman being removed. I don't know what Heyman was like to work with this time around. So, I know back in his days when he was running SmackDown in the early 2000s, there was a lot of friction between him and the McMahons with some of the ways that he would present ideas or push for things. I'd heard from, just WWE talking heads that he had calmed down with that. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it as well. And it could just be, I don't know, maybe Vince just doesn't want to deal with two different executive directors for two different shows, and he wants to go through one person to oversee it. And Pritchard had spent a long time with the company before he left or let go, whatever it was, back in I think the late 2000s, early 2010, something.
Well,
along those lines.
He was fired in '92.
And came back. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's had like a very on again, off again relationship with the company, and then he had a cup of coffee and TNA and stuff like that. But I think, very much what you're saying. When did Pritchard come in? WrestleMania 3? I think it was right around that time of Hogan Andre.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think he came in around that time, and like you said, he was there till '92, left in '92, came back. I think the next year in '93, he was not there for WrestleMania 8. I believe that's the one that I know for sure. And then he was there, I think, until the late 2000s, and then he also ran into the Stephanie McMahon buzzsaw, and he left at that time, and he was gone for a while. And he just came back last year after, like you said, they announced Heyman and Bischoff I think it was last summer. So, I don't even think Heyman made it a year as the executive director of Raw, and Bischoff was the executive director of SmackDown. That only lasted a few months. He was let go. Pritchard has come in, and in less than a year, he is now overseeing creative for both Raw and SmackDown. So I guess those are the reasons that I would speculate as to why Heyman is no longer there or is being relieved of his duties for that role. And I guess I wonder now what that will mean for Monday Night Raw and how that will change the show, in what ways the show will change. So what ways do you think this will now change the way that Monday Night Raw looks every week with Heyman no longer being a part of the creative process?
Before I respond to that, I want to give you a date. June 27th, 2019, Eric Bischoff and Paul Heyman were hired. So he is 50 weeks. Couldn't even make it the full 52 weeks, Paul Heyman. Eric Bischoff lasted, long enough to have a cheese Danish, and Paul Heyman lasted a year. How is it going to affect the product? You care about the product, Sorry, a little Eddie Kingston.
David Starr?
Yeah.
Oh, this was a David Starr rant. No? Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
No, this is a Outlaw Inc. You care about, people not worrying about their lollipops in their shoot interviews. See, the thing is, Raw's been unbearable for some time, and people are like, oh, you're a WWE hater. No, shut up. I'm not. It's 3 hours. If you're going to put on a 3-hour show, it better be a damn good show. Because if you take the best parts of Raw and you trimmed it down to a 2-hour show, you would have a much more manageable show to watch. But you don't. You've got 3 hours. You've got video packages among video packages, on highlight packages, on bullshit backstage segments. You have a talented roster on Monday Night Raw. And for all intents and purposes, what the internet has called Paul Heyman guys, or guys that Paul Heyman has been very high on, guys like you just mentioned, Austin Theory, clearly Seth Rollins, of course, but Austin Theory, the Street Profits, Aleister Black. Who else am I forgetting, Joe? That was big Paul Heyman guys.
Well, I think Drew McIntyre is somebody that he has probably gotten behind pretty good, especially given the way that he was booked around WrestleMania time. Like you mentioned, the Rollins, Buddy Murphy, Austin Theory, that crew of guys. I think is some people that he pushed for. I know he pushed for some people.
Go
ahead.
From NXT.
Yeah.
No, sorry, you were right. You mentioned earlier because you mentioned Andrade too.
Yeah, I think the Andrade and Angel Garza, and then some guys that he, I believe, had pushed for, but it didn't really work out so much with Ricochet, Cedric Alexander. I was just thinking recently about the last few weeks of Raw, the last month, and since Money in the Bank, they debuted Bianca Belair after WrestleMania, and I haven't seen her in quite some time. And Shayna Baszler hasn't been on Raw in quite some time either. And I know maybe things got screwed up because, of the change in direction with Becky Lynch having to leave due to her pregnancy or something. But I don't know how much that impacted Baszler. I'm guessing it did some. But they haven't been on the show in a while either. So, there's been guys that, from what I understand or what I've read, that he's been pushing for. So you wonder if those guys will be impacted by him no longer being the lead creative for Raw over the course of those 3 hours. And will different people get pushes? Will certain people's position on the card change? Will alliances change? Face turn, heel turn, things like that. Will we see more comedy, more goofy skits? I'm guessing that's just based off of what I know as far as how SmackDown is versus how Raw is. But not that Raw is lacking on its goofy skits, but you never know. I guess Bruce seems like more of a guy that I don't want to call him a yes man for Vince, but I think he certainly is more in line with communicating with Vince, and I guess them having a better dialogue as far as what Vince probably wants to see on these shows every week. So I get the sense that we'll go back to seeing more Vince McMahon pushed or preferred matches and angles on television every week.
Yeah, I've been a listener of Bruce's and Conrad's podcast for quite some time, and he's very protective of Vince McMahon, and Conrad is contrarian to a lot of what Vince says and what Vince's ideologies and what Vince does. And Bruce, even before Bruce went back to work for Vince, he was very quick to, he would poke fun at Vince a little bit, but when it came to business and wrestlers and who to push, he was very, very protective, almost like a father figure, which is what a lot of the people say that Vince loves. He's like a father figure. So you brought back the WCW guy in Bischoff to run a show on Friday nights. You brought back the ECW guy in Paul Heyman to run your show on Monday nights. The reason why you brought those guys back is because they were new creative minds, and even the most creative people get burnt out. How many fucking M. Night Shyamalan movies are out there? And 1 or 2 out of every 15 are good? You get burnt out creatively of this shit. So, it's kind of like when they tell a wrestler back in the day to go learn a new hold, leave the territory, and come back to freshen it up. It's the same way with creative. So the idea to me was, okay, we have 2 new minds in creative that have a little bit of a different mindset than what we've been doing, because the reason why we're bringing in new people in is because the product, for the most part, sucks. It's been just a baseline for however long, and with Roman not being there and with John Cena gone, you don't have that next big star. And so when you bring in these new minds creatively and they cultivate the talent on their roster, and like you said, Paul Heyman pushed to bring these guys up for SmackDown because he wanted to use the new talent on Raw to make new names for himself. I don't think you're going to get that with Bruce Pritchard. And a lot of the times on the show, what I hear Bruce Pritchard say is that they so-and-so wasn't big enough, or they didn't. The infamous quote is, would that guy stand out in an airport? That's or it looks good on an 8x10. That's what Pritchard cares about, because that's what Vince McMahon cares about, and you're entertaining an audience of 1. So you're probably going to see more of the guys like Keith Lee, Donovan Dijak, the guys that stand out and look like real monsters. And we were just having this conversation in our group chat with BK and Kyle about Adam Cole going to the main roster, and why will Adam Cole not? You and I don't think he would have a very fruitful main roster experience strictly because of his size. Well, guess what? Now you've got a guy that cares even more about the size than you had before. I don't watch Raw as it is, to be completely honest with you. I'll catch little bits and pieces here and there, but it's not weekly viewing, and I don't think it's going to be going forward if it's going to head in the direction that we think it's going to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the last thing I'll just say on it is, I think to your point about writing these 2 shows, I think a lot of people who follow the writing stuff, the backstage, when Vince Russo left in '99, part of the reason that he left was because he was getting burnt out, having to try to now write 2 shows. He was going to have to write Raw and SmackDown, which were at that point 2 hours a week. SmackDown had just started in '99, and him and Ed Ferrara, I think, were looking to get away from that, so they left and went to WCW. Well, now you're looking at Bruce Pritchard having to oversee 5 hours of television every week, and then on a pay-per-view week, probably 8 to 9 hours of TV every week in a particular week. So I think that's going to be, for any human, that's got to be hard to do. I don't know how that will be for him. But I guess in terms of to wrap it up from my side, to think of what will happen and how it'll alter the quality of the show. I think for me personally, I would predict that the quality of the show will go down. I do watch Raw every week for the most part. I catch most of the show, and there are some things on there that I don't like that I think are kind of silly, but there are a lot of things on there that I think are good, and they're pushing some guys, like you said, like the Street Profits. I think deserve the push, and McIntyre deserves a push, and I like Andrade and Garza, and it's hard to tell now with the crowds not being there in terms of how people really getting over, but I don't know. I don't know if these pushes for some of these guys are going to change or not, but I think we're going to start to see some different people get pushed, and I don't know. My prediction is that it's going to be a lower quality show for me personally. I don't know how it'll be for everybody else. That's my expectation, but maybe you'll be pleasantly surprised. I don't know. And
I just want to make it clear, I don't necessarily not watch Raw because of the talent on the show. I don't watch Raw because it's so navigating through the show. As somebody who watches it every week, is really hard to do, Joe. It's really hard to sit through, the segments just to get to a decent to above average match because the talent is so strong. But it's just the formula of the show, everything makes it very, very hard to get to the good stuff. And if, like I said, it's why it'd be a good 2-hour show, because you could pry through the bullshit just to get to the good matches, where it's Andrade versus Rey Mysterio, or a good segment from the champ, Drew McIntyre. But we'll keep tabs on the situation, as they say, and we'll be here going forward, ranting about it every single week. But let's get to the next part of the show. But before we do, I just want to say, man, it's great to have New Japan Pro Wrestling back, isn't it? How nice was that announcement last week?
Yeah, I mean, that's great to see. Of course, they haven't run shows since, I think, February. So, they had a press conference earlier this week, announced that they would be coming back, I think, starting this weekend, Monday. They're going to do empty arena shows for about a month, and then they're going to end up starting to let fans in at, I think, about 25% capacity or thereabouts in July. So they're doing the New Japan Cup. The bracket just came out for that, so I know we'll be looking at that at some point in the near future. Maybe hopefully we'll get a chance to discuss it on the show. And then they're going to start doing those shows next week. So they'll be back, so anybody who subscribes to New Japan World gets some new content.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's been way too long since we've had content for New Japan World, so that'll be a fun next week. But without further ado, man, let's get to our 5 count, our top 5 list of our top 5 favorite buddy cop movies, and what wrestlers you think could play the actors in those movies. I think it's fair if we go one for one. I'm sure we're going to have some overlap in here, but do you want to start? You want me to start? Whatever you want, pal.
Yeah, no, why don't you go ahead and start? I mean, the way I did this was I basically tried to focus on, wrestlers that I thought would be able to fill the parts in these buddy cop movies. So,
exactly.
Yeah, well, why don't you give it a start, and then I'll go after you. It's your
All right, I'm gonna start with a newer one. Number 5 for me is The Other Guys. Mark Wahlberg, Will Ferrell, very, very funny movie. This one took some. This was probably actually the easiest one that came to me. Alan Gamble in that movie. He was. He was Will Ferrell. I got Joey Ryan for Will Ferrell in this movie, and this one's. I don't know why. I just pictured this dude killing Mark Wahlberg. Josh Briggs playing Mark Wahlberg's role in that movie. Especially when he's like slamming everything, and then he's like very funny and sarcastic in the camera. So number 5, I got The Other Guys, starring Joey Ryan and Josh Briggs.
Nice. Okay, so I went with I had to go through a list of all the buddy cop movies because there's just so many over the years that I've watched, and I'm trying to remember what it was. So the first one I guess that jumped out at me was 21 Jump Street, and Team Tremendous obviously does a pseudo gimmick of cops as it is. So I felt like Dan Barry and Bill Carr in 21 Jump Street. I feel like so anybody who's independent wrestling fans hopefully knows Team Tremendous. Those guys are very good wrestlers and very entertaining wrestlers. So I'm gonna go with those two guys for 21 Jump Street. And my next one, I again went to the independent scene. Two of these are independent wrestlers, and the rest of them are more mainstream. The old Turner and Hooch movie from years ago, and I just feel like Solo Darling and Officer Magnum would fit into that pretty well. So anybody who knows Solo Darling and her gimmick, I think that would slide in pretty well to the context of that movie. So those are the first two for me on my list that I came up with.
Dude, those are so good. I don't know how I slept on Team Tremendous. As 21 Jump Street, who would be who?
I don't even know. I just want to see those guys.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. All right, I'm going to go number 4 for me, Beverly Hills Cop. Now, this was a buddy cop movie, but there were 3 cops. Axel Foley, there was Billy Rosewood, who's Judge Reinhold, and then John Taggart, who was the older, a little bit bearded, drinking, funny cop. So for me, Axel Foley, John Moxley, Billy Rosewood, Colt Cabana, and then Taggart would be played by James Storm. I mean, to me, that movie, that's ratings, man. That's ratings all day. Next, all right, I'm gonna go. All right, 3 for me. This is tough because I love all of these movies so much. Lethal Weapon.
Mm-hmm.
So now this one, this was probably the most fun I've had researching a podcast, because I was watching scenes on like YouTube and stuff like that and just picturing what wrestlers can go in there. So Riggs and Murtaugh. Riggs is Mel Gibson and Murtaugh is Danny Glover. Riggs is the hot shot, doesn't care about life, crazy guy, and Murtaugh is the older, seasoned, I'm not too old for this shit cop. So for me, Murtaugh, Yvonne Dudley. Riggs, Hangman Page.
Yeah, that makes sense. So interesting. So I had Lethal Weapon on my list here too. So I'll do that one next.
Okay.
And I tried to do it in a similar vein as of how the characters are, like, as you described them. So I went, Farouk and Bradshaw. I thought APA, right? I could see Farouk being the older guy who's kind of a little bit bitter and salty about things, and Bradshaw just not giving a crap about anything, just giving what we know about him. So I have them. And then I have 2 more left, so I'll do this one. Rush Hour. Have you seen Rush Hour? I think, right? So that's
Seen all 3 of them.
Of course. So I Jackie Chan and why can't I remember?
Chris Tucker.
Thank you. So for the Jackie Chan role and Chris Tucker, I went Akira Tozawa and Montez Ford. I think Montez Ford's hilarious, so I feel like he would fit into that pretty well. Can you picture those 2 guys in a movie, just bouncing back and forth with the comedy?
I could literally picture. Yeah, I could totally picture that right now. Kafil Kafish. Yeah, like I could totally picture that whole movie in my head. Man, you're all right. You're batting 1,000. Next up for me is a movie that is near and dear to both of our hearts. Running Scared, the 1986 classic, under the radar. Ray Hughes and Danny Costanzo. Billy Crystal plays Danny Costanzo, and Gregory Hines plays Roy Hughes. This one I went back and forth on because this one was a little bit difficult for me. So for Danny Costanzo, I went Daniel Bryan. And for Roy Hughes, Caprice Coleman.
I like that. Yeah, I think that fits. I
think they would play well off of each other. Really good comedic timing.
Yeah.
And so number 1, my all-time top 5 dead or alive favorite movie ever. Cop movie, buddy cop. I don't care what kind of movie it is. My number 1 is Bad Boys. Martin Lawrence and Will Smith. The greatest movie ever made. This one was the easiest for me to come up with. Marcus Burnett is Martin Lawrence. Mike Lowry is Will Smith. Santana and Ortiz. Tell me you can't picture Ortiz playing every Martin Lawrence spot in that movie. And especially in the Stadium Stampede, when Ortiz is getting out and he looks back, he's like, yeah, he's dead. Yeah. And you and I, it was so good. Those guys are absolutely hilarious. So I thought they would make a great Marcus and Mike.
I think those guys should be in a movie somehow. Whatever it ends up being, those guys deserve to be in a movie. The only one I had left here is so this is more. We talk about this all the time off air. Was we both watch Miami Vice, the show, a lot, and but they made a movie out of it, so I wanted to include it here in the list. They did make a movie.
All right,
I think
I'll allow it.
These two guys would be better in the movie than the guys that actually were in the movie, but this is what I think anyway. So we got Sonny Crocket, and I think it was that guy who was like really popular in the 2000s.
Colin Farrell.
Yeah, there you go. And I'm not really sure what he's doing these days, but anyway. So yeah, Sonny Crocket, which more famously was played by Don Johnson, and then Ricardo Tubbs. Philip Michael Thomas, I think, is the TV show guy and in the movie. Yep. So I'm going with Keith Lee for Ricardo Tubbs because I feel like he's like a cool, right, like funny dude. And then you got to go Sonny Crocket. There's only one choice, Adam Cole.
Oh my god, dude, that's so good. Keith Lee and Adam Cole together.
That's my list.
Frankly, I don't know why WWE Studios isn't listening to us right now. They have money everywhere. How much fun was this, man? Going back and thinking about these movies and just picturing the wrestlers in the roles of these. Oh, that's good stuff, man. That was a really good list. I appreciate you digging into the old memory bank, what you came up with. It was a hell of a list on your part.
Yours as well. I appreciate you coming up with the idea for us. I wanted to make sure I did my research, and two schmoes out on Long Island came up with those 10 movie ideas, and they're just out there consolidating writing teams for 2 shows, 5 hours every week. Doesn't seem that hard. I don't get it, but
no,
whatever.
It's not. And I want to, I think what we should do, we should reach out to a lot of the talent that we spoke to with our ideas, to see if they agree or disagree. I feel like Caprice Coleman, if anybody has seen Running Scared, it's probably Caprice Coleman, right?
Yeah, I think so. I can't see how Dan Barry wouldn't be all in on doing a movie at some point. The guy's a wrestler, he's a comedian, he's just a really all-around great guy.
Yeah, he's hilarious, and he has a new podcast, a tremendously awkward podcast. He's kind of like a more successful version of us, right?
Yeah. That sounds. Yeah.
There's
probably a lot of people you could describe that way, but in this case, it definitely applies. Yes.
He's self-deprecating, but he gets paid for it. See, we're self-deprecating and we pay for it. So there's a difference. That's for sure. Well, listen, man, this was a very fun edition of the All Night Long Wrestling Podcast. We appreciate all you guys checking us out. We want to hear your ideas. If you like movies, it doesn't even have to be a buddy cop movie. Oh, like for example, like Happy Gilmore. Who would be Happy and who would be Chubb? There's so many options out there, man. So if you guys like us, you're big movie buffs, you love the comedy, send us your ideas. I'd love to see some of the combinations that people come up with. It was really a blast going back and looking at that. And we'll keep paying attention, see what happens with the Paul Heyman situation. Hopefully we come back to you guys before the New Japan Cup starts, I believe in 5 days from now. We should have another episode up and maybe do some brackets, get a little bit of gambling going on here, and legal gambling. We'll play for gold coins or something, right?
Yeah,
that's
Pogs.
legal.
Pogs, I think, is a popular thing.
I mean, it's New York. It's not legal for me to walk outside of my house without a painter's mask on. So we're going to do the best we can. Be sure to follow us along everywhere at All Night Long WP on all of your medias that are social, facebook.com/All Night Long WP. And for another edition of the All Night Long Wrestling Podcast, he is your host. He's the Stallion. I'm the Elmer Fudd to his Daffy Duck. I'm the Enforcer, and we are tapping out.
Friends.